The distress colon, a galaxy where power was the ultimate currency, humanity was viewed as the weak link, a species barely worth mentioning among the great civilizations that spanned the stars. For centuries, humans had been overlooked, their advancements seen as trivial compared to the marvels produced by the dominant alien empires. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the most powerful races, had long dismissed humanity as inconsequential. But all of that was about to change. Captain Adam Kennedy sat in the command chair of the Starship Odyssey, his gaze fixed on the endless void of space. The Odyssey was a testament to human ingenuity, a state-of-the-art vessel equipped with the latest in human technology. Yet it was not fearsome by galactic standards. The ship, much like the humans who built it, was considered inferior by those who held true power in the galaxy. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal," announced Lieutenant Reyes, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Kennedy straightened in his chair. "Source? Zaria, a colony on the edge of the Una system. It's an unaffiliated planet, technically under the jurisdiction of the Galactic Council, but..." Reyes trailed off, her eyes meeting Kennedy's. "But no one cares enough to help them," Kennedy finished. "Patch it through." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a desperate plea from the governor of Zaria. The message was short, but filled with urgency. The colony was on the brink of collapse. Resources had been hoarded by the ruling elite, leaving the majority of the population to starve. Now, a full-blown rebellion was underway, with the common people rising against their oppressors. The Galactic Council had turned a blind eye to the situation, leaving the colony to fend for itself. Kennedy listened intently, his jaw tightening with each word. He had seen this kind of injustice before, had fought against it in wars long past. His crew, a ragtag group of individuals who had come together under his command, shared the same look of determination. They might not have been the galaxy's most feared warriors, but they had something far more valuable, a sense of purpose. "We have to help them," Kennedy said finally, his voice firm. Commander Liam O'Brien, the ship's chief engineer, nodded. "Aye, Captain. We're all with you." Reyes frowned, her brows knitting together in concern. "But, Captain, the Council won't like us meddling in their affairs. We could be starting something bigger than we can handle." "Maybe," Kennedy admitted. "But if we don't do something, those people will die. The Council has made it clear they don't care about Zaria. It's up to us." The crew exchanged glances, and one by one, they nodded their agreement. The decision was made. "Set course for Zaria," Kennedy ordered. "Let's show them what humanity is capable of." Arrival at Zaria. The journey to Zaria was tense. The crew knew they were venturing into a situation that could easily spiral out of control. But they also knew that they were the only ones who could make a difference. As the Odyssey approached Zaria, the crew got their first look at the planet. What had once been a thriving colony was now a landscape scarred by conflict. The cities were crumbling, their infrastructure devastated by years of neglect and corruption. Smoke rose from numerous fires, and the signs of recent battles were evident from orbit. "Looks like we're not the first ones to arrive," O'Brien muttered, scanning the readings on his console. Kennedy leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "We're picking up traces of several other ships in the area. Some of them have the markings of private mercenary fleets." "Mercenaries!" Reyes spat. "Of course. The Council doesn't want to get their hands dirty, so they hire others to do it for them." Kennedy's expression darkened. "Prepare for landing. We're going to get to the bottom of this." The Odyssey descended into Zaria's atmosphere, its hull shuddering as it passed through the planet's thick clouds. When the ship finally touched down, the crew was greeted by a desolate scene. The landing zone was on the outskirts of what had once been the colony's capital, a city now reduced to rubble. As the crew disembarked, they were met by a small group of survivors, their faces gaunt and their eyes hollow from weeks of fear and hunger. One of them, a young woman named Zara, stepped forward. Her clothes were torn and she carried a makeshift weapon, a piece of metal that had been fashioned into a crude blade. "You're the humans who answered our call?" she asked, her voice rough from disuse. Kennedy nodded. "We are. I'm Captain Kennedy, and this is my crew. We're here to help." Zara studied them for a moment, her expression hard. We don't have much time. The governor's forces are everywhere, and they'll be looking for you. Come with me." She led them through the ruins of the city, navigating the narrow alleys and debris-strewn streets with practiced ease. The signs of battle were everywhere: collapsed buildings, scorched earth, and the occasional flash of blaster fire in the distance. It was clear that the situation was dire. Finally, they reached a makeshift bunker hidden beneath the remains of a once grand building. Inside, they found a group of resistance fighters, all of them weary but determined. "We've been fighting back as best we can," Zara explained, her voice low. "But we're outnumbered and outgunned. The governor has the backing of the council, and he's using it to crush us." Kennedy glanced around at the grim faces of the resistance fighters. "Why is the council supporting him? What's in it for them?" Zara's eyes flashed with anger. "The governor promised them access to our resources, our mining operations, our technology. In exchange, they turn a blind eye to his tyranny." Kennedy's fists clenched at his sides. "That ends now. We're going to help you take back your planet." The resistance fighters exchanged uncertain looks, but Zara nodded firmly. "We could use the help. But you should know it's not going to be easy. The governor has powerful allies, and he's not afraid to use them." "We've faced worse odds," O'Brien said with a grim smile. Kennedy looked at his crew, then back at Zara. "We're not leaving until Zaria is free. The battle begins. The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. The resistance was small, but they knew the terrain and had a deep-seated hatred for the governor's forces that fueled their determination. With the help of the Odyssey's advanced technology and the expertise of its crew, they began to devise a strategy to take back the planet. The first step was to disrupt the governor's control over the city. They would need to take out key infrastructure points, communications, supply lines, and the heavily fortified government center where the governor was holed up. It was a risky plan, but it was their only chance. The resistance fighters, armed with whatever weapons they could find, set out under the cover of darkness. They moved quickly and silently, their knowledge of the city's layout allowing them to navigate through the shadows. Kennedy and his crew were right there with them, using their advanced gear to provide support and coordinate the attacks. As they approached the first target, a communication tower that was key to the governor's ability to coordinate his forces, Kennedy felt the tension in the air. They had one chance to pull this off. "Everyone in position?" he whispered into his communicator. "Ready," came the whispered replies from his crew and the resistance fighters. "On my mark, go!" Explosions rocked the night as the resistance launched their attack. The communication tower was the first to go, its collapse sending a shockwave through the city. The governor's forces, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, but the resistance was already on the move. Over the next few hours, they struck at key points across the city, disrupting the governor's operations and sowing chaos among his troops. The resistance fighters fought with a fierce determination, driven by years of oppression and the hope that they might finally see their planet freed. But the governor's forces were not without their own resources. As the resistance made their final push towards the government center, they were met with fierce resistance. Mercenaries hired by the governor, armed with advanced weaponry and backed by council forces, launched a counterattack. Kennedy and his crew found themselves in the thick of the battle. The sound of blaster fire and explosions filled the air, and the smell of smoke and scorched earth was overwhelming. But they fought on, determined not to let their new allies down. "Keep pushing forward," Kennedy shouted over the din of battle, his voice barely audible over the chaos. O'Brien, wielding a heavy blaster rifle, provided cover fire as the resistance fighters advanced. Reyes, piloting a small drone, coordinated airstrikes on enemy positions. Dr. Reeves moved through the battlefield, tending to the wounded and keeping the fighters on their feet. But the closer they got to the government center, the harder the fighting became. The governor's forces were well-trained and well-equipped, and they fought with the desperation of those who knew they were fighting for their lives. Kennedy ducked behind a wall, narrowly avoiding a blast from a mercenary's weapon. "We're not going to make it at this rate," he muttered to himself. "We have to," O'Brien replied, panting as he reloaded his rifle. "If we don't, it's all over." Kennedy nodded grimly. We need to take out their command structure. If we can get to the governor, we can end this. But getting to the governor was easier said than done. His forces were dug in, and they had no intention of letting the resistance reach their target. The governor's fall, the battle for the government center, was brutal. The resistance fighters, driven by years of oppression and the hope of finally seeing their planet freed, fought with everything they had. But the governor's forces were well prepared and well armed, and they weren't going down without a fight. As they neared the government center, the resistance fighters took heavy casualties. The mercenaries fought with ruthless efficiency, using their superior firepower to hold the resistance at bay. The streets were littered with debris and the bodies of those who had fallen, and the air was thick with smoke. Kennedy's heart pounded in his chest as he led his team through the chaos. They were so close, just a few more blocks, and they would reach the government center. But the closer they got, the harder the fighting became. "Reyes, we need air support now!" Kennedy shouted into his communicator. "Already on it, Captain," Reyes replied, her voice strained. "But it's not going to be enough. They've got anti-air defenses set up around the government center." Kennedy cursed under his breath. They needed to take out those defenses, but they were running out of time. The longer they delayed, the more resistance fighters would fall. "We have to keep moving," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We have to get to the governor." The team pressed on, pushing through the enemy lines with everything they had. O'Brien used his engineering skills to disable enemy weapons and sabotage their defenses, while Dr. Reeves continued to tend to the wounded, doing his best to keep the fighters in the battle. Finally, they reached the government center. The building was heavily fortified, with thick walls and turrets positioned at every corner. It was a daunting sight, but Kennedy knew they had no choice. "This is it," he said, glancing at his team. "We take down the governor, and we end this war." The team moved quickly, using the cover of the surrounding buildings to avoid detection. O'Brien disabled the security systems, allowing them to breach the outer walls. But as they moved inside, they were met with a barrage of gunfire. The governor's personal guard was waiting for them, and they fought with a ferocity that took the team by surprise. But the resistance fighters were relentless, driven by the knowledge that victory was within their grasp. Kennedy led the charge, his blaster rifle cutting down the guards as they pushed deeper into the building. The corridors were a maze of twists and turns, but Zaria, who had joined them for the final assault, knew the layout well. Finally, they reached the governor's chambers. The door was reinforced, but O'Brien quickly set to work, using his engineering skills to bypass the security locks. Within minutes, the door slid open. Inside, Governor Sirius stood alone, his back to the team as he stared out the window at the burning city below. "It's over, Sirius," Kennedy said, his voice steady. "You've lost." Sirius turned to face them, a bitter smile on his lips. "Lost? No, Captain, I haven't lost. You may have won this battle, but you'll never win the war." Kennedy raised his blaster, but before he could fire, Sirius pressed a button on his desk. An alarm blared, and the floor beneath them began to shake. "He's going to bring the building down!" O'Brien shouted. "Get out of here!" Kennedy ordered. "Now!" The team turned and ran, racing back the way they had come as the building began to collapse around them. The sound of explosions filled the air, and the walls shook as the structure began to crumble. Kennedy was the last to leave, glancing back one last time to see Sirius standing in the center of the room, a look of calm resignation on his face as the ceiling collapsed on top of him. The team barely made it out in time, sprinting for cover as the building came down in a cloud of dust and debris. When the dust finally settled, they looked back at the smoldering ruins of the government center. "It's over," Zaria said, her voice filled with relief. "He's gone." But Kennedy knew that the battle was far from over. Sirius might be dead, but his influence would linger. The Council wouldn't take kindly to humanity's interference, and there would be consequences. But for now, they had won. Zaria was free. The aftermath, the days following the battle, were a blur of activity. With the governor gone, the resistance quickly moved to take control of the city. They worked to restore order, distributing food and medical supplies to the people who had suffered under Sirius's rule. The Odyssey remained in orbit, providing support as needed. Kennedy and his crew assisted the resistance in rebuilding the city, using their technology and expertise to repair the damaged infrastructure. But it wasn't long before the Galactic Council responded. A fleet of council ships arrived in the system, their presence a reminder that humanity was still considered a minor player in galactic affairs. Kennedy was summoned to a meeting with the council representatives, a group of alien dignitaries who had been sent to assess the situation. "You have overstepped your bounds, Captain," one of them said, a tall reptilian creature with cold, unblinking eyes. "This planet is under the jurisdiction of the Council. You had no right to intervene." Kennedy stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated. "We responded to a distress call. The people of Zaria were suffering and no one else was willing to help." "You risked destabilizing the entire region," the alien snapped. "The Council will not tolerate such reckless behavior." "Reckless?" Kennedy's voice was calm but firm. "What's reckless is allowing a tyrant like Sirius to remain in power." The Council turned a blind eye to his actions, but we couldn't. "We did what was necessary to save lives." The alien's eyes narrowed. "You may have won this battle, Captain, but there will be consequences. The Council will be watching humanity closely from now on." With that, the meeting was over. Kennedy returned to the Odyssey, his mind racing with the implications of the Council's words. He knew that humanity's actions had put them on a collision course with the galactic powers, but he also knew that they had done the right thing. As the Odyssey prepared to leave Zaria, Zara and the Resistance leaders gathered to bid them farewell. "You've given us a chance," Zara said, her voice filled with gratitude. "We won't forget what you've done for us." Kennedy smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Just promise me that you'll make the most of it. The fight isn't over yet." Zara nodded.
"We will."
"Zaria will rebuild, and we'll be stronger than ever." As the Odyssey lifted off, Kennedy watched the planet recede into the distance. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of hope. They had proven that humanity was more than just a footnote in galactic history. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to be human. And that was only the beginning.